Welcome to another episode of the SC Hub's NBL podcast for the week. This is Barnesy back again, fortnightly host, and we've got a great special guest for this episode, Nathan Strempel, who I think everybody knows Nathan. Look, you've got obviously the basketball with the commentary and Shane Hill show as well and everything, and a bit of football there as well. And football, I'd normally say soccer, but because, it's you, I'll say football. Welcome aboard, mate, to the SC Hub, your debut for this season.
Barnesy, mate, thank you. Very generous intro. Long time listener, first time contributor. So thanks for having me.
No problem at all. And look, I know you're all about the real basketball as well, but how is your SuperCoach going at the moment, mate?
Well, I love being on here. I feel like I got invited to contribute a few rounds back. I was in the top 10 for the round, and that's when someone reached out and said, "Hey, mate, you're going well. Why don't we get you on?" And things went downhill over the last few weeks. So I was flirting with the top 200 a few weeks back, but chasing a bit of cash the last few weeks. Some moves worked, some didn't, but I've slid down around 5, just inside the top 500 now. So going okay, but still work to do.
No, top 500 is great. And I mean, I haven't gotten a top 10 finish this season so far. So you're doing well as far as that goes. My week was, I thought, pretty bad at the start. So look, talking about the round, Nathan, it was, for me, Pinder had that terrible score of 14 points or 12 points. It was, I've put it down in my memory already. It was pretty bad. Then Cooks threw up a 43 in that first game, and I thought it was pretty good because I brought him in, but I was tossing up between him and Bryce Cotton as my captain. So I initially thought, oh, geez, Barnesy, you've done the wrong thing. You should have gone the pod option and gone for Cooks. But obviously Sunday, everything turned around and it all came up Bryce Cotton. So despite having Pinder there, I think it ended up being all right. At 5:15, I had a big score and I've rocketed in the 65th spot. So pretty good. I was happy to be top 100. I think, mate, it was one of those rounds where I think everyone was pretty scarred, right? Like Pinder hurt me, but there were several teams that had a Lopez who was only the one game played in a double game week, and then also Harrison who got ruled out. So I think everybody was pretty affected by somebody not playing at least one of their games.
Yeah, I feel like this round was the stereotypical roller coaster of emotions that SuperCoach can bring. And the first game of the round, you're sitting there thinking Cooks is going well. I decided to try and fade PJC a few weeks ago for his singles, and then thought I'd try and get away with one more week with a backcourt of Jalen Adams and Bryce Cotton, thinking that could match it. And after the first game, I thought, I'm on here. PJC might drop a bit of cash and I'll look like a genius. And then Sunday just brought record-breaking games. And the first score I saw was Cotton's 59. So I had Cotton as captain, so I thought, this is pretty good. That SuperCoach score is going to be all right. So I wasn't following live and thought that's okay. Then I saw PJC had 34 and 10 and a pretty decent SuperCoach score as well. So that stung me a little bit not having him. I'll look to bring him in this week. But, yeah, you mentioned Pinder, who I had, Harrison, who I had, and I think others out there in the same scenario where one day you're feeling like you want to just delete your team, and then the next day things turn around.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, Bryce Cotton had 23 in that first game and he ended up on the round on 100. So that's our number one round of the SuperCoach season now, 100 points on the nose. Obviously an NBL record as well. Didn't get to the 60 mark. I think the fans and maybe even Bryce were a little bit disappointed he didn't get to that 60-plus point mark because obviously never been done before in NBL history, but he's still going to be the top point scorer at the moment. And really, I mean, look, you've watched a lot of basketball. Do you see it getting broken anytime soon? I know we had Bateman go into the 50s, and that was pretty extraordinary. But the way he did it, it's very hard. And I've got a lot of I play a lot of NBA fantasy as well, and I've got a lot of US friends that are all in that for many years in my leagues. And I was trying to explain to them how difficult it is because obviously in the NBA, and you can get a 60-point score, multiple times in a season. But the 40-minute games of NBL, it's very difficult. And especially in a professional setting, let alone like even playing a rec league, you just don't have enough time to get up those many points. In the NBL level, getting defended by NBL players and being able to put up that many points in the 40-minute era, it's quite spectacular.
Yeah, it's wild that it got broken. I think sometimes in sports and maybe even expand that to life in general, we spend a lot of time looking back or looking forwards and making comparisons. I just think it's incredible the season that we're having. I was lucky enough to be doing courtside commentary when Golding went for 50 10 years ago now. And then for him to go for 46 just a few weeks back, and we're like, this is outrageous that 10 years later Golding's had 46 and whatever he had in the third there. And Bateman gets 51. Now Cotton goes, hold my drink bottle, I'll go and drop 59. So it's ridiculously hard. And the fact we've seen 3 scores like that in the one season is amazing. And so you're tempted to say, who knows how this ever is going to get broken. But if you asked me a few weeks ago if we'd see 3 scores, let alone 1 score north of 45, I'd say probably not. So who knows where it goes. I just love that the athleticism and talent in the league just keeps growing, and who knows where it goes from here. But nice to see Bryce come back and just say, hey, this is still my league.
Yeah, very deserving. He's, arguably the best import we've ever seen in the NBL, and he's going to go down as one of the best players we've ever seen in the NBL as well. So, I mean, and in front of the Perth fans as well. Like, it made it that much more special because, I mean, if he's away at Brisbane or New Zealand or something, like, it's great, but doesn't have those hometown fans. But at RAC, in front of his home crowd, it was pretty special. And I also have to mention, like, and I'm going to sound like that I'm smashing on the NBA now. I'm a veteran NBA supporter. I started watching in the early 90s with my sons in the finals and stuff. It's in the NBA, you can get this sort of stuff done, Nathan, because I always make the excuse, look, it's great, but the caveat's always, geez, the defense is pretty sloppy though, and you can find some easy looks. And you watch someone put up a 60-point game in the NBA and you can see a lot of open threes and stuff. Even though Bryce did that, one of the things that I was sort of talking to my mates about was it wasn't easy. They were trying to defend him pretty hard. You saw that 4-point play on halftime. He's in the air with a leg kicked out and someone in his face, and he nails the 3 from 30 feet away and then gets a 4-point play. Like, he wasn't doing it easy. There wasn't easy shots there. It was just an extraordinary performance.
You'd like to think that it never is. If someone's approaching 50 or 60, hopefully the defense ramps up. But I haven't watched it live yet. That's my treat tonight once the kids are in bed to watch this one back. And so I haven't seen the numbers, but usually to get a score like that, you need to get to the free throw line a fair bit because there just isn't time in the game and go absolutely wild from the 3-point line. And that's what Bryce does so well. He's either knocking down threes or he's getting fouled, or he's doing both. So that's where he's sort of in the mix there. And you think if anyone's going to challenge that, it is someone who's adept at getting themselves to the free throw line over the game and racking up 10, 15, 20 from the free throw line when the clock stops, and then you can make up the rest as you go if you get a little bit hot.
Or maybe Golding will go for 12 threes next round. We'll see. The other guy that's, you mentioned PJC. I mean, it was one of those things where him and Bryce were the 2 most popular captains of the round. And I don't want to say PJC owners got lucky, but you'd feel pretty fortunate because it's like, man, normally you'd just be like, my round's dead because Bryce Cotton went for 100. PJC 86 is an extraordinary score as well. He had a phenomenal SuperCoach week. He got the double-double. And I felt like, and you'll rewatch the game and maybe think the same later, he really went at Cotton in that third quarter. And there was a point there where it was real touch and go for everyone concerned, including super coaches, because it was like, man, Perth are up 20 plus points here in the second, and this could just be no one plays in the fourth quarter except for the end of benches. And PJC, I felt like in the third quarter, basically took it over. And he had a great score as well. So, I mean, that was the backcourt to have, obviously, for SuperCoach. And I don't think that people fell too far behind if they ended up with a PJC captain as well.
Well, I think everyone loves and appreciates what PJC does as a player. And I feel like he's just got his super coaches just in the back of his mind there. Not only a double-double, but a double-double with assists. So those extra points there. Like I said, I was fading him the last few weeks, hoping for a little bit of a price drop, trying to make up some cash where my bank had sort of been hurt from missing out on the price rise with Hickey early in the season, missing out on Lopez in New Zealand, a few others. And he would have taken a fair drop if he didn't go for the double-double. So it's almost like I'm going to try and make sure we win this game, but I'm just going to make sure I get 10 assists. Because you feel like PJC is the kind of player that can do whatever he wants. If he's going, I'm going to score 50 tonight, he'll go and do it. If he wants to get 10 assists, he'll do that. He's kind of got the ball on the string and does what he wants. So I agree. When I saw, firstly, that Cotton had 59 and he was my captain, I said, this is gold. We're done here. And then what a master PJC is. So how cool to watch that, aside from Supercoach, that MVP race with now Cotton fit again, Golding starting to just wind the clock back, and PJC doing what he's been doing all season. It's going to be fun to watch.
And it was speed on speed. Like, I can't believe how fast PJC was just lightning. There was a couple of times where he just went straight through the middle just for these layups. But Bryce as well. You know, I love watching the speed of both those little guys running. You know, it's not just the threes. They run through the middle and just get these open layups with their speed and athleticism and their finishing. The surprise of the round was definitely Cam Oliver. For Supercoach, you know, he went up $41,000. He's now $336,000. We were all clamoring for Xavier Cooks, and it was like, look, if you want another rental other than Cooks for the Kings, go get Jalen Adams. And he went okay, but he had a bit of trouble that second game and only ended up on a 57. Cam Oliver, 91 points. It was a hugely high-scoring Supercoach round. 91 points for Cam Oliver, and he's done it with 14% ownership. So if you had Cam Oliver, you had an amazing round. It was a great pick-up. I am a lifelong Kings fan, so I have constantly been screaming all season for Gorge to tighten his rotations. Don't feel like you have to play everybody. I'm waiting for the assistant coaches to run on and get minutes at the moment, the way it's going. It's just crazy. And then you had Cam Oliver benched all these other weeks and stuff. And a few weeks ago, he only got like 14 minutes in a game. And you're just like, just unleash Space Cam. What are you doing, Gorge? Killing Supercoach. Unleashed him on the weekend. He started that first game and just started banging threes, going to the basket at will, finishing. And it ended up being a massive Supercoach week for Cam Oliver, who I think was the surprise of the round for me.
Oh, big time. I mean, for what it's worth, I think Danke could still go at 50, 40, 90 if he does get some minutes as an assistant coach. But yeah, I think Space Cam was unpopular amongst super coaches because I think most people had traded him out because they just couldn't trust the rotation. But if you held him, or if you just took a risk and realised he dropped in cash and thought this was a week, well done, because he went bananas. And Gorge has been hard to predict all season with his rotations, but I think surely now Cam Oliver's cemented that starting spot in minutes, and so may well be a target going forward if you want to bring him in for some Kings doubles. Did you have him?
No, I didn't, and I briefly looked at him because I always thought this was going to happen. It was just always so risky, you know, when it was going to happen, and I love and loathe Gorge as a Kings fan, so being my team, it's so hard to jump on him. So I've just kind of said, look, I can't do it. I'll stick strong just with the Xavier Cooks. But geez, I wish I did get on. And look, I got to ask you as well, like with these rotations, like when you're watching it from a real basketball perspective, which obviously affects Supercoach as well. I'm a Kings fan, so I'm very emotional about it. How are you seeing like the rotations and stuff? Because for me on the weekend, like we had Bruce getting pretty big minutes still. Robertson, I always thought was going to come in when Adams was hurt and then end up being back at the end of the bench playing 5 minutes. And he was the first one off the bench, I'm pretty sure, on the weekend in that first game. I still can't get a read, and it still looks like Gorge is trying to figure out his rotations, but we're halfway through an NBL season. Is he trying to figure these out, or do you think that this is Brian Gorge and he's just going to keep going with who he thinks each game is going to work out best for him with these subs?
I enjoy hearing the sort of the growing chatter about Gorge needing to move on, and Gorge hasn't got it anymore. His rotations are off. The one thing Gorge has always been a mastermind at is people management, and you can knock him for other things as a coach, but he's been so good at knowing when and which buttons to push with players that are juggling big egos. And so I've seen a bit of the Kings this season, called a few games for SEN, and occasionally I get the feeling in MC some games there at the Kings. So it's being around it a little bit while not sort of being in the inner sanctum. I think they have an enormous challenge in managing like a ridiculously talented roster, and championships aren't won in December. I think Gorge is just trying to get things in the right place when they're pushing towards the postseason and roles be known then, and trying to keep guys engaged and on their toes and body language and attitude right. And there's signs he's starting to do that. So I think the vision was always the lineup was going to be starting Cam Oliver, Jalen Adams, Xavier Cooks, Bull Qual, and I'm missing one. Is it Alex Tui? I think that's in that lineup. It might be someone else.
That was another weird one too. He got benched game one and only played 2 minutes in the first half, and he was the reason why they came back in the third quarter, and he played a monster game in that second game.
And that's where, like, is Gordon playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers? And this is just keeping everyone on their toes till he moves to the bench so he can get peak engagement at the end of the season. I think time will tell, but I still back the history Gord just had on getting he's had some enormously talented rosters over the years, and he's got the best out of them at the right time of the season. So the Kings are still really well placed. You finish top 4, you're as good a shot as anyone. So I like to think, and myself, I like to try and be impartial as I commentate a bunch of games, but living in Sydney, I like seeing New South Wales-based teams doing well because it means people in New South Wales get excited about basketball. So I like to think the Kings, as well as the Hawks who are flying at the moment, will be well placed to challenge at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that they both will be. At the halfway point, though, I really would like Gorge to know his rotations by now and people to know roles, because I'm not as good a coach as Gorge, and I'm happy to admit that. I don't have quite the resume, but to me, I always feel like as a player, you want to know your role and get the repetition well before you're going into final series. And it's going to creep up pretty quickly for us. You mentioned Illawarra. We'll quickly touch on them. Trey Kell and Tyler Harvey, the forgotten men of this SuperCoach round. We didn't really talk much about Illawarra at all because they only had the single double game week. But I mean, in saying that, we're happy to talk about Kings players and bringing guys like Xavier Cooks and even Jalen Adams. And really, Trey Kell got very cheap around the 270K mark. And he threw up a really nice 62-point round. Good value for those that couldn't afford the other Kings options. And Tyler Harvey threw up a 67. Similar price now, the both of them at around the 280 to 300K range. It's hard to buy them now because the doubles passed, but I did feel like one of the surprises out of the round as well was the amount of people not looking outside the box, and certainly super coaches that are chasing now each round need to look at other double game week guys to rent outside the popular ones, and the Hawks on the weekend were definitely the ones to look at.
Yeah, myself included. Like, I missed that. I went for Jalen Adams and Tyler Harvey and or Trey Kell was the move. Like, and to get that little bonus pushing through, and I think there's lots of value with the Hawks. It's like, when do you jump on Darius Days? He's ridiculously cheap. Sure, the guy can play. Surely it's going to happen. And we saw in their second game he got rolling, and I think he's one to look at. And those point of difference moves going forward, I think, are what set the season apart.
Yeah, Days was interesting because at around 200,000, he was so cheap. But he was cheap for a reason in SuperCoach because he's really fallen off after the initial weeks where he looked really good. And it was interesting on the weekend, they decided to bench him, and Tatum's gone for him as a 6-man role. And I thought that was really smart because I don't think many people were sort of thinking about that. And you don't normally see it with imports that have showed so much promise. And you mentioned, Gorge managing egos and stuff. Look, a lot of the imports expect to start when they're here, and Days would be one of them. And yet he's embraced that role. Tatum's got him to play really well on the weekend in the 6-man role. And I thought that it was great because he came on and was super aggressive. You could see him crashing the boards, really enthusiastic, and you could see the energy in his play again. And it's something that was probably missing in the month or two before that seen him drop off a little bit. So a lot of the time in SuperCoach, Nathan, you go, oh, look, if they're bench players, I'm going to gravitate towards some of these starters instead. But he should still get good minutes, and his output and production is probably going to be even better, I reckon.
Yeah, I think he's one to look at. And there's a few floating around now, and it's still pretty bunched up at the top of SuperCoach. And then obviously, if you're 100, 200, 300, 400 back, you're chasing a little bit. And I think that's what's going to set it apart, those moves that go right. So Days is one, Mooney's one who's sort of fallen down in cash now. Jarrell Martin, is he going to find fitness and get going soon? And I reckon throw Zakarsky and Meninga in there as one that are a couple cheaper. Like, those sort of guys are the ones. And Days, I think we just saw a moment on the weekend where he started to find his role again. And if the Hawks continue to succeed, I think his price and his SuperCoach output will go up again.
Yeah, agreed. And we'll talk about trades now in the upcoming round and a bit of the schedule. I got to finish on the Hawks though by saying, putting Days on the bench, just from a real SuperCoach perspective, I love it because to me, one of the Hawks' biggest pluses to take out this championship, they got great starters and they've got stars there, but their bench, when you're bringing in Olbrich, who scored 21 points in that first game in limited minutes, and then you've got guys like Hickey coming in off the bench, and then you throw Days in the mix as well. And I'm a big Lee fan as well. He's a shooter like you see a lot of those overseas players from Asia coming in and doing well, but he's also pretty fearless. Like, he had a dunk on the weekend that I was surprised about, and he was pretty aggressive. Those 4 guys off the bench cover all your positional needs and really give you so much. And, I said I'm a Kings fan. I'm scared of Illawarra facing them in the finals, not because of those stars that they've got, but because whenever those guys need a breather or get in foul trouble, those bench guys come in and tear it up.
Oh, this Hawks team's the real deal. I was emceeing down at Illawarra for their home semi against Melbourne last season, where Hickey went bananas, sent it to OT, and they beat Melbourne in overtime. A Hawks team with home court advantage in the finals will be a real worry. I agree with you. Lee is a complete player. I love him intentionally banking a 3 the other week. He's got all the tools. So they've got everything there. And I think Days is a starting caliber import in this league, and opportunity form, whatever it is, the last few weeks have fallen away. But I have full faith he'll get back to what we saw at the start of the season towards the business end. So, yeah, Hawks team for pushing towards the finals, I think they're right up there and they can go and win a chip. From a SuperCoach perspective, I like it because his rotation's short. He goes with those 8 guys largely. So whoever you're looking at, they're going to get a reasonable amount of minutes with their starting coming off the bench. So I think Hawks guys, particularly with their schedule turning around in a few weeks, so there'll be some juicy ones there.
Definitely. Well, talking about schedules, we've got to talk about this upcoming round. Double game weeks. We have 6. So Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, Melbourne, New Zealand, Perth, all double game weeks. Out of those, you're looking at Melbourne, New Zealand, and Brisbane as the only ones that have the multiples in a row with the string of them. So I do think, looking at this, and we're going to talk about players to trade in a minute, I always look at trying to not rent guys when I don't need to, or if I don't have the luxury to. And to me, when you've got 3 teams on multiple double game weeks in a row, it's pretty easy to kind of target those. But as we saw with Illawarra on the weekend that we just touched on, if you sleep on Adelaide, you might miss out on the top point scorer of the round. Now, I know that they've obviously got a couple guys out, but even if you look at somewhere like, if you go on to Cairns, they've got some interesting guys as well. So sometimes you've got the luxury of not getting these string of double game week guys, or you've set yourself up where you've got lots of them and you can look at some of these others. But with 6 double game week teams, Nathan, it is a week where we're going to see complete teams of double game weeks. So if you're short on it, it's probably time to use your last boost, and it's probably time to go for it, because not only is this week going to be a big scoring one, but it's going to set yourself up for the future ones as well.
You mentioned the future, and there's a few different ways of looking at it, but I think that's really important this week to look forwards a little bit. So after this round, you've only got 4 teams on the double, and again, round 14, only 4 on the double. So I think you need to do a little bit of future planning while also making sure you've got at least the starting lineup full of guys on doubles and pretty reasonable scorers on doubles too. You got away with a Henschel starting last week, perhaps. Maybe you want a little bit more than Ben Henschel this week when you're going into your doubles. And someone like Pinder's an interesting one. He's out with illness. Is he going to come right? Same with Tyrell Harrison. That's what's going to throw a few spanners for people. And the other one on the schedule, the thing sitting in the background is these 2 guys from Adelaide coming back off suspension. Kendrick Davis, a tough one to justify trading in because he's only going to play 1 game of the week. But if he goes off in that 1 game, he might get a pretty significant price boost and might be hard to afford the following week. And then Trez is coming after that as well. So can you find room in your budget to get them? So they're the balls you're trying to juggle setting up your team for the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a jigsaw puzzle on the run home here. Let's have a look at some of the popular market movement at the moment. Look, the trade outs are interesting. So let's start on that, because there's a few, there's people like Cooks, which makes sense because he's on a single now and hurt. But there is some guys on here who do have a double game week and people are jumping off. The number 1 trade out player is Pinder. Now, I'm going to go outright and say I was fully ready with that first game. I said, on the SC Hub chats on Discord and everything else, I'm trading Pinder out. I don't care, if he scores 100 points next week. I don't want him anywhere near my team anymore because he's so frustrating with his inconsistency sometimes. And we all know the ability that he has is obvious, but he just doesn't perform week in, week out at the moment. And then he just plays the one game. I do think that we obviously want to raise trade these type of guys because they've burnt us. But I also made the comment in Discord, Nathan, that this is the time that Keanu Pinder rocks up and throws up an 80-point round because it happens all the time. He's consistently inconsistent and he throws up a terrible round. Everyone trades him out and then he throws up a big score where he'll have a 48-point game in a double game week. I can see it happening. So I've actually come back off the ledge a little bit and gone, you know what, I do have other guys that I kind of need to trade. I should take the emotion out of it a little bit. And that's probably going to be my advice on Keanu Pinder. It is an illness, so you'd expect him to play this double game week. He is also at centre as a dual, which is handy because I don't think that the centre stocks have a lot of options. Harrison was disappointing before he was out with illness last week. And I don't see any other home run guys for this round. So that's my reasons to hold Pinder. I'm not supremely confident, but I was quite happy to see only a 65 break even because I thought after last round, it might have been 80 to 90. And 65, that's doable for him, or at least he's not going to leak a load of cash. So I'm not going to say to people, don't rage trade him out, but for some teams, it might be a better option to consider just maybe holding him.
It's always, it just makes you feel good on the inside when you see the rage traders alive and well and you see someone like Pinder as the most traded out. I was planning to trade Pinder going into this week before he had the 14 and before he got sick, just in terms of trying to plan structuring, getting some Perth guys out before getting lumped with a chunk of Perth guys at the end of their double game week runs. But I agree with you. I think there's some logic to holding him in terms of trying to make back some of that cash he lost as well. Pinder and both Doolittle have gone down a bunch while you've had them. And the hope's always by the time they get into those doubles, they're at a reasonable price to trade out. Pinder's at 288 right now. That's it's a pretty rough trade out. You're just locking in those losses you've made with him. So I, too, now I'm thinking maybe hold for a round and hope he has one of those bounce back games. Maybe it becomes a bit of a point of difference if he is significantly traded out. I'm far from confident in advising people to hold Pinder because he could not play. He could be benched. He could definitely roll for a pair of 14s on your double game round and then lock in even more loss of cash. But Pinder's definitely one to balance, and that balance of how many Perth guys can you hold going into their last double game week.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the emergence of Amansa is frightening for Pinder too, because he's been playing really well the last month or so, and he's taken his starting job on more than one occasion. I will say in Pinder's defence for holding him this round that they do have a hard matchup against Illawarra, and I'm really looking forward to this game. But it is at Perth. So I think not being at the Snake Pit is a massive advantage. And then the second game is against Adelaide, and it is away, but the Perth to Adelaide road trip isn't too bad. And Adelaide are obviously going to be without Harrell and Davis. So that's going to make a big difference. I didn't love what I saw from Jarrell Martin on the weekend. And I do think that they're going to have to rely on Humphreys a lot and he can get into foul trouble. So I don't mind the matchups for Pinder this week, and that's probably something to take into account. And there is some other Perth guys too, like Henshaw, that are being traded out, who I've looked at as well. And I think that you can go either way with guys like Henshaw. You do need to plan ahead with these trade outs for the Perth guys who make up a lot of the top 10. So it is good to start getting them out. But with a 39 break even, he's getting around that 20 points a game still. He's probably going to be around about on that, likely in the 40s even on a score, which is a pretty decent score to have there even on your bench. So I think that you need to probably balance, Nathan, not thinking that you have to trade these guys out, but knowing that next week they are all going to be on singles. So you need to start the Perth exodus.
Yeah, I think Henshaw can be a hold. He's got a confirmed starting role, but sometimes the best laid plans hurt you. I traded out Pepper for Cotton last week, and Pepper outscored him in the first game, and I thought this is a pretty rough result. Cotton did what he did, so it all worked out all right in the end. I love the Pinder-Adelaide matchup. Pinder used to be a 36er, didn't get a great run at it there, so I think there's always elements of that revenge game kind of thing, and Pinder loves to play against these kind of stay-at-home bigs. Pinder's really mobile, can move in transition, and that's not necessarily a strength of Humphreys or Jarrell Martin. So it's a great matchup for him there, and that could be a case to hold him. I'm just trying to avoid a case where we're getting abused come the end of next round for encouraging people to hold Pinder and he stinks it up.
Yeah, no, we could throw the caveat up there that he could score 10 and 9 in both games, and that's fully on the table for him. But he could score 78 in the round as well. So I think individual teams need to look at their needs and who they've got, and it's going to come down to that. Look, trade-ins at the moment, Jack White's the number one. And I was always planning to go Cooks to White, and it's a pretty easy straight swap. Melbourne United have got 2 double game weeks in a row. Jack White came back from injury after the FIBA break. And look, he was solid. He had a double-double. He hasn't been a big scorer in the NBL, certainly not as big a scorer as I thought that he would be. But he does have those intangibles with his hustle. He gets a lot of rebounds with his athleticism. He's got his putback dunks that are great for the crowd to get pumped up. And he gets some defensive stats here and there. So I like it. He's playing New Zealand and Brisbane this round. And next round, he's got Illawarra and also Sem. And both of those, 3 out of the next 4 are going to be at home, actually. So it's a pretty good run for United players. And I do think, whilst New Zealand have been at the top of the table, I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast, and certainly I'm sure that Breakers fans hate me, but look, they've overachieved for me. You've done great. I'll give you all the props in the world for being where you are. But with the constant shortages up front, especially, they're starting Menenga up front. Lopez was out for a game and then he plays, and Darlings did not play the second game and stuff in the forward spot. I don't think that they've got the depth there, and particularly up front. I'm not sure that they've got it, and the schedule now is going to really grind on them. They've just had a pretty tough double road trip that they're going to be coming off. They've had to endure getting pumped by Perth there, and Bryce Cotton's 59 points. I can't see them being in the top 4 in a month's time. And it's one of those ones where you look at United and you just go, look, I just think that they're going to feast on Brisbane and on New Zealand. I don't think there is too much better matchups they could have in a double game week. So I'm talking a lot of positives, but Jack White, is he a must-have?
I'm hesitant to agree with you because I think I'm going to find it really hard to bring him in because I need to bring in PJC this week as well. So getting the bank for both of them might be not feasible for me. But I love Jack White. He wouldn't have left my side if he hadn't have got injured. He's so consistent and he averages a double-double. He's constantly going to go after it. And he gets stuff late because he's just such a hustler. So in games where maybe he isn't as prominent early, he gets a lot. So I'm going to be really nervous if I've got someone like Pinder in my side and I'm playing someone else who's got Jack White in their front court. So I think he's a great one to get after if you've got all the other pieces. So, Bryce Cotton, you'd say you really need that Bryce and PJC backcourt this week. Anything else, you're going to have a really nervous week watching. If you've got those 2 in your backcourt, though, I think Jack White's the next one on the list.
Those 3 elite guys are going to be the guys that you're going to want for your foundation, your SuperCoach team this week. There's no doubt about it. And it's going to be interesting because a lot of teams, like you said, they're not going to be able to get everybody in. People have struggled to get PJC back, or they've just gotten Cotton in. People missed Cotton last week and might want to jump on him now. And then Jack White's just so expensive. So he might be the afterthought. He comes into this round, 18% ownership, and then everybody who's going to be able to trade him in. Even if he's in the 30s, that's low ownership for Jack White. So I think that you can get a pretty good bump by getting him in. I can't see anyone near him as the best trade-in, but I love the second most favourite trade-in in the market at the moment. Casey Prather is a forward guard duel in SuperCoach, which I find super handy. But one thing I loved about Casey on the weekend, they obviously had Harrison and Bannon out. I love him getting minutes at the 4 spot. He's a guy that goes in and rebounds better than what I expect him to. And he's sneakily, approaching double-double possibilities at the moment. Now, if Bannon is out again, and he was on crutches, but then suited up, so it was a little bit shaky on how bad his injury actually was during those FIBA break games. But he didn't play last week. I would imagine Harrison's back, but I think Bannon might be a 50-50. So if Bannon's out, look, I really like Casey for this week. The only knock on him is going to be he's gone up to 260,000. I wish I got him a couple of weeks ago for a $60,000 odd discount, but I didn't. I still think he's a great trade-in. And he's a great trade-in because Brisbane, up until round 19 now, are just all doubles. And to me, I love Keandre Cook, but my second guy that I want from that Bullets team for the run is going to be Casey Prather. And I just think that he's going to, go off and really keep getting better and better, which I think that we've seen, right? Because that first month, he was obviously working his way back into shape and into form. And I think the last month, we've really seen him show out and start to contribute for the Bullets like we expected him to.
Prather's an absolute baller. Like, he was a little secret for me that I didn't want to advertise, but I think the secret's out now. I brought him in around 5 or 6, just planning a season-long hold, knowing it's going to go up in cash. And then just that forward, that dual position just gives you so much flexibility. And Justin Schuller was assistant coach at United when they won the championship in 2018 with Prather. So he loves him. He's always going to utilise Prather. And Prather was the man on that United team. I mean, the man alongside Goldie and Casper Ware. But he's a guy down the stretch that Schuller trusts. And you saw on the weekend with some injuries, he had no hesitation. Prather was their go-to guy. First few buckets of the game was Casey Prather. So I think he's a great piece to have. I reckon Bateman and Cook are going to go up and down, but I think Prather's going to be consistent and then have some games like the weekend where he throws out a 40 for you, but he's going to consistently be a 20 or 30 when you're looking for cheaper bench pieces to ride out the seasons. You're trying to get cash. Can you get PJC, Davis, and Trez all at the same time? If you're trying to get that sort of cash, you're going to need some guys that you can move around and flex on your bench. So I think you're onto a winner there, and anyone else trading him in's doing well too.
Well, the 40-point single game week, it can't be understated. He is away versus United, which is a tough second game for Brisbane. But that first game is really good, and he could throw up a 40 in that first game quite easily. So you're looking at Brisbane at home versus Adelaide that's very depleted. I think that's a fantastic matchup at the Brisbane Entertainment Centre for the Bullets. And that second one, it could be tougher. But look, if he throws up a 40 and a 25, 65 points from a 260K duel. And one thing that I find so handy with getting Casey Prather in is that if you've got a Henschel and you're planning on holding him for a couple of weeks, you can move those guys between guard and forward spots really easily. And the duel is so important in NBL SuperCoach. I stress it every week. So I love him. I think the market's got it right, and I think that he's primed. I did not expect this guy who's number 3 on the list to be as traded in. He was going to be my little secret. And then I saw that he's gotten more expensive than I thought he was, and I'm not interested anymore. But Isaac Humphries feasted on the weekend. He played big minutes. He had a double-double, also had 3 steals. And he's obviously the last man standing for Perth at the moment up front. For Adelaide up front. He obviously has Harrell out. It's given him a lot more rebound opportunity. It's given him minutes opportunity. And putting Martin in there, I didn't think that Jarrell Martin has looked right to me this season. And I was interested to watch him and how he went with his minutes. In the first half, I think he had next to no rebounds. He hadn't scored any points, and he basically got benched. And in the second half, he was a lot more active. But it was the Humphries show. Now, they're going to rely on him until Trez is back. And at $254,000, he's cheap. I will say, I spoke about him on some of the forums and stuff. And I was remembering a couple of weeks ago when he was only 200,000. I think going up 17,000 and not being close to that 200K mark hurts him a little bit because obviously he's a short-term rental. But with a 27 break even in a double game week, we saw it last year where he just exploded for a 3 or 4 week period. He could easily throw up 60 points this week. Humphries is going to be relied upon this round. So I do see it. I guess it just depends on team makeup a little bit, whether you want to take that quick rental punt, because he can be a bit of a stepping stone if he does fire to somebody else in, say, round 13.
Yeah, he's a bit of feast or famine. He really could light up, or he could get in foul trouble, particularly that second game where they've got Perth and he's guarding a more mobile Pinder. It gets in foul trouble and then really hurts your score. But for those who can't afford a Jack White or some of these other premium trade-ins or are looking to bank a bit of cash to prepare for trying to bring Davis and Trez in, he could be an option to look at as a bit of a stepping stone.
Yep. Look, cheapies, there's guys like Carlin Davison coming in. Look, I'm interested on your take because he's only got a -5 break even and he's only 75,000. I kind of feel like from a SuperCoach perspective, at this point of the season, the teams that are going even half decent should have enough money or guys to trade out of value that you don't have to be downgrading all the way to 75K to make your moves. And -5 break even just isn't enough to make money. I don't know how much of a role he's going to have. We saw like a DNP for Darling in that second game, and a lot of people brought in Darling last week. So you can see how quickly that can unravel. And you just can't get these 0-point games from guys in NBL Supercoach. So what do you think about Davison? You know, what's his role going forward? Is he really going to be worth teams jumping on like they are at the moment?
Davidson can play. Like he's a heck of a player, but in terms of opportunity, I wouldn't be confident he's going to get it. And I agree with you this time of the season. If you're in the mix and really going for it to push up in the rankings overall or win your comps, you really need to be smart and back yourself to make the best choice on these guys that have dropped down in price and get them back into the right time. Cotton, it was a great example on the weekend. You get him coming off injury, he's down in cash, he's going to make you a bunch, and that's going to help you get cash. And I said earlier in the pod, it's about making the right decision and timing it with whether it's Darius Days, you go for Matt Mooney, a bit lower price with Rocco Zakasi or Menenga with some opportunity with some injuries out there. Jarrell Martin, if he can build his fitness as the season goes on, I think he'll be nice and cheap. And or Humphreys a few weeks ago, you mentioned it's those sort of guys. I think if you're dropping to a 75K, you're essentially writing off a position and you're going, I'm just going to bank on 9 guys getting it done and take it as a bonus if this guy gets some court time and scores. But it's pretty hard to go and push up and win comps and push up in the top 100 if you've got 9 guys that are playing meaningful roles.
Exactly. And you've got guys as well that are a little bit more expensive, but still cheap. You know, Rocco, 149,000. Bit of a coming out party on the weekend, 26 points. That's his best score of the year. But he also played 35 minutes. Now, you'd imagine that Harrison's going to be back, and they're 2 guys that don't really share the court. They can't. Is it fool's gold? Because to me, I was going to look at him and just go, look, there's enough double game weeks where he's going to have some value and he's going to do some things where it's going to be beneficial. But then I also looked at it and went, well, you know what? Every other week he might be an 18-point score on a double game round and he doesn't get the minutes that we're hoping for because Harrison's healthy. And I looked at it and I went back and forth in my head because I had planned on getting Rocco, but the fact that he just went up 29K was real off-putting. And then I also said the same point that I made to everyone just before with Davison at New Zealand, and that was, well, I've got all this money. Why am I doing it for? Just get a gun in. So I just see him as a guy that I don't need to do it with when I'm looking at it. I think that if this happened and Brisbane's schedule was like this earlier in the season, it would have been a no-brainer, and it didn't really matter if he didn't score much. But at this point of the season, I actually see Rocco as a little bit risky, and I can't see where he's going to get the minutes from with the rotations they've got at the moment.
Yeah, I think you just got to I think you need to go with either Rocco or Harrison as your guy and ride it out through Brisbane's doubles. You don't want both because if Harris, you know, they're both centre only, they're hard to rotate. I think you're taking a punt on one, not both, because you're kind of betting against yourself if you take both of them. You take Rocco if you think he's going to play a bit extra, even with Harrison there, build his draft stocks, let him have a crack at it. And just Supercoach's line, wouldn't that be exciting as this kid hopefully ends up going in the top 20, the top 10 in the draft, even if he really gets rolling and another prospect. Or you're going with Harrison. You're backing him to be Brisbane's guy, and Rocco might play minutes in there, but 26 you're not going to get every week while Harrison's around. So I think it's one or the other for mine.
Yeah, 35 minutes on the weekend, and has to be said, like his output was 26 in Supercoach. His PPM went down drastically because he's not a guy that can really play that many minutes or should be playing that many minutes. So his impact in the game actually goes down because he needs a rest. The week before he played 20 minutes and that was 23 points. And that's got to be his sweet spot. I think 20 minutes is Rocco's kind of sweet spot where he gets enough time to make an impact, but he doesn't get too tired and it gets the best out of him. But the problem is that before that, he's never done that. His minutes have been 12, 13, 6, 8, 11, 13, 16. He's going to be in that 8 to 16 minute range, it seems, and even 16 seems pretty high, and it's just not enough. Like I said in the preseason, I sort of thought he was going to get 17 or 18 minutes because I thought that they were going to be taking into account he's trying to get drafted, and Brisbane are sort of, they're not one of the contenders, I don't think, on paper, and they didn't start like that either. So I thought that he'd be getting more consistent minutes, but it just seems to be too hard for the coach with him and Harrison there to be able to make it happen.
Yeah, look, I hope he gets minutes going forwards. I've got Harrison in my team, and it's just too risky. You know, Harrison misses a game with illness on the double, so you want to rotate in the bench, then you're trying to start Rocco, and that's really nervous, even if he's going to get the extra minutes starting him. So it's a no for me. But if you're starting centre, you want to just rotate in a mix of Matt Hurd and Pinder and whoever else you might get on the doubles, and then you can have Rocco sit in your bench and take what you get. Could be an option.
Menenga's the other guy we mentioned. He's gone up to 218,000 now. So I think that he's just, I really like him and I own him and have for a couple of months, but it's just one of those things now where he's slowly gone up in value and he's producing. Had a 32-point game on the weekend against Perth, which was great, but he was only 15 against Illawarra. And I thought he actually did some good things against Illawarra, but it still only equated to 15 points. That's going to be the problem with him. He's sort of got an awkward break even where it's low enough where it's not scary, but is it low enough where you actually purchase him? At 33 break even, he might only make $5,000 or $10,000, and you're going to be trading him out pretty quick, and his points upside isn't really there. So he's one of the ones where I think, Nathan, if you own him like me, I'm pretty happy. I'm glad I got him, but I don't think that if you're a non-owner that you'd look at him as a buy.
Yeah, I got him when New Zealand came back from America and thought he was going to be great, and he wasn't. And then I tried to get off quick. And then I actually brought him back in when I saw that Bolden was out for 3 or 4 weeks. They were moving on Gillespie. Now Fall apparently might be injured. I'm not sure of the timeline on that. Pinot as well, maybe carrying something. So I just felt I got on him then and felt like he'd be one that might make a bit of cash and would just score reasonably, ideally not as a starter, but someone who can be on the bench, forward, centre, you can rotate through as you need. Now he's at a price point where it's a bit harder to justify bringing him in, but I think and I hope as an owner he will make a little bit more cash over their doubles in the next few weeks, and they've got such a good schedule going forward. The centre position is so weak, so you have to ride with someone. So New Zealand's schedule plus they're thinning out at that centre spot makes me think Menenga will just be serviceable over at least the next 2 or 3, maybe even throughout the duration. And they got whatever it is now, 7 out of the next 8 doubles or 6 out of the next 7. Maybe he's one to look at for that reason. And he's one that I throw in that mix of what I was saying of guys that are at a lower price that maybe can go there to downgrade somewhere and upgrade somewhere else.
Going to do a live flip-flop. I am starting to rethink saying I'm not sure he's a buy because you're right, 7 out of 8 doubles actually. And if teams need to downgrade, I will say like he's a better downgrade than going to a Davison or one of these guys. Like, you know that Menenga will at least get the minutes. He might score poorly, but at least he'll get them. And 7 out of 8 doubles. As an owner, like I'm probably just going to leave him there. I don't think I'm going to get rid of him unless I'm, got that luxury, because he's just going to keep having the double game weeks there on the bench and be that centre jewel. So I can come around to it a little bit because there's going to be teams that probably need that. And you're right about the centre position. It's quite annoying. So yeah, we'll wait and see. I also forgot that Fall got injured on the weekend because he looked really good the first game, and I obviously thought he's just going to build up his minutes and roll from there. And after game 1, I was all aboard. Let's get Taco Fall in next week. It's Taco Tuesday time, and then the second game, non-existent and ended up with an injury. So if he's back this week, though, it has to be said, Lopez missed a game on the weekend. He's back and playing again now. It will get very muddy between Menenga, Fall, Lopez, and some of these other younger guys as well playing up front. I mean, they started Darling in that game 1 at the 3 spot, and I looked at it and went, man, he's such a 4 to me. I can't see. He's got a bigger build. I don't think he's hugely mobile. He seems like a 4. It's just a lot of guys to fit, but if Fall is injured for a couple of weeks, that's going to help Menenga stocks as well. So watch those injury updates and see what we can see. We might not get any until the round starts, but some of the other guys that are on this list quite quickly to go through, we're looking at some pods now. And my pod, I'm really upset that he's on the top 10 because people are actually looking at him, but it is only 2.5% of trades. I'm the number 1 stakeholder in the Sam Wardenberg fan club. He is like one of my favorite NBL players. He's flicked a switch this year. I love his attitude. I love his game. I say it every week. He just does everything. And on the weekend as well, he had a double-double. He ended up, twinging his back, but I think I think it was his back. They were working on it, but I think he's going to be okay, provided he's healthy. He's got a 45 break even, but he's only 287,000, and he is one of those center options. So, I mean, we talk about Pinder and Harrison as the only real center options lately. This is one of those ones where if you want a rental or you can afford to, Sam Wardenberg at 287,000 is slightly cheaper than both of them, and he's actually outperformed them. He's at around a 29-point average for the season. And on the single on the weekend, despite getting hurt, he scored a 34 against the Kings. Now, they do have Tassie and Sem, so a bit of a mixed bag on matchups. And then they've got a single 2 weeks in a row, and then they hit the doubles. But I will throw out there, Nathan, I, being such a Wardenberg fan, have looked at it and gone, Barnesy, is there a way that we can take the double this week and just hold Sammy for 2 weeks and just have him there for the other doubles coming up? And I think that there could be, and it could be a bit of a sneaky way to get a pod option in there who could outperform these more fancy big men.
Mate, this is the problem of doing a podcast and putting out content like this. You're forced and very generous. You're sitting at 65 to throw out there what you're thinking. But I tend to feel the same, and I'm kind of letting out one of my thoughts that might help catch up. I think a team is going to do well by taking a Cairns player this week and holding him through to that round 14. So overall, you look at Cairns' schedule, it doesn't look that great, but that round 14 double is really only 14 from the double there. So whether it's Wardenberg, who I'm an equally bigger fan of, even though he burnt me significantly last year when I held him through most of his doubles, which he struggled during. Wardenberg's a heck of a player. And I'll put him in a similar basket to Menenga in terms of they play through him. So he's always a risk to score well. And that's why I say with Menenga in New Zealand, sorry to jump back to that, but the offense goes through him. And so whether it falls in, those injuries come back, he's always going to get plenty of touches and have an opportunity to get SuperCoach numbers. And Wardenberg's the same, but another level this season. Since Menenga's left Cairns, he's been the guy for forward. And he's been excellent this season. I haven't owned him all season, and it's to my regret. He's great. The other one is Taron Armstrong. I think if you can look at one of those Cairns pieces this week, use them this week, find a way in your structure to hold them through to round 14, I think that can be a bit of a difference maker.
Armstrong's a great point because he's pretty cheap and you could get him in almost pretty much a straight swap just about for Ben Henschel. And he's got the double this week, and Henschel's obviously off the doubles next week anyway. And then all of a sudden, you can hold him one more week and then have those. Yeah, he's a premium guard option that is cheaper than all the premium guards. So he's a really good one to raise. And I do think the teams that are set up well enough can look at him early. Scored 20 plus easily on the weekend, and he was the go-to man. I don't like to criticize the young fellas. The only thing that I'd like to see in his game that would help SuperCoach is as a starting point guard, he had 0 assists for 98% of that game. I'd like to see him try and look for other plays and trying to create for others. He wasn't doing that as much, but he was just so aggressive offensively, though I can't have a dig at him because he was their go-to guy, quite obviously. He's a great one. And look, I think that he's I'm turning around on him. Like I did see him as a borderline NBA prospect, but after last round, I went, wow, like if he can keep playing like this, he's developing so fast for a young guy. He might keep moving up draft boards and stuff on the NBA radar.
Love that you're saying the advice you'd like to give him to help SuperCoach. Didn't Adam Ford say something last season that SuperCoach is only for stay-at-home dads and people on the dole or something like that? So I don't think Fordy's going to base his coaching strategy around what's going to help Karen the SuperCoach game. But I think I'm just trying to help the young kids, mate, and the coaches that need a bit of a hand. I'm here for them. I mean, Taz needs, as a young player, whatever's going to help build your brand and your fan base out there. I think he actually is the guy who's going to facilitate and get you a bunch of assists. Taron's such a talented and smart player, and I think the only thing that holds him back from being a long-term boomer and an NBA prospect is his body. He's had some of those foot injuries and the ankle at the start of the season, and so fingers crossed his body holds up. I think he's so smart that he takes what the defense gives him. It's the case the other game he didn't facilitate and score as much. Get as many assists because the opportunity was there to score. But I think he's a brilliant passer, sees the floor really well, and he's a guy who's going to go up in price and play really well over the next little bit. So a great bring in if you can bring him in, keep him for round 14. When I'm just looking who it is, so Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, Hawks. So maybe if you wanted a backcourt with Taryn in round 14, and you can afford a Kendrick Davis because you paid down for Taryn. But there's others out there. You might be looking at Cook or either the Illawarra guards for that round as well. So some choices to make, but I think Cairns, potentially a sneaky Cairns double this week and hold for it around 14 could be a play.
Yep, and you mentioned his health. I was very worried for him when he came down off that missed dunk. I thought that he thought he wasn't going to get up. It looked painful. It was a hard fall, and after he got up, I think that he just stayed down more for his bruised ego and embarrassment than his body, which is a positive thing because I thought he might have hurt his shoulder or something the way he came down. It was pretty tough.
It reminded me of Josh Giddey when he's playing at the 36ers, had a similar one and pretty much landed on his face and he's bleeding from the face. And you're like, please don't hurt yourself in a dunk like this. And as he got up and you could sort of see he was okay, it was almost like Zave Cook saw he was okay and just gave a bit of a giggle as he was helping to his feet, just saying tough on their young blood, knowing he's probably a future Boomer teammate and just a tough fall there for Taryn. And epic play. He makes that dunk. Cairns are right in the game. Sadly, it didn't go for him.
No, he hit some big shots. So there was a thing that I was so impressed with. They weren't easy shots, and he was super aggressive, and he was hitting them. So it was really good to see. Look, have you got any other pod options that you wanted to throw out there for people before we move on to captains to finish up?
Geez, I'm already feeling pretty vulnerable with what I've thrown out there already. But I'm just trying to stay in the top 500. I'm giving everything I've got. I'm just looking across here at my notes on who's on the double. Taryn's the big one. I mentioned those guys a few times now that I think are underpriced. I don't think I've missed anyone. The only one I've got left up my sleeve, and I'll go there, I think Delhi's building back into a role at United as they're coming to a double this week. Assist numbers are up. You can see he was just controlling the game. And he's probably another one. I don't know exactly what his price now, but his price is probably steadied a little bit. He was red hot start of the season. So Shea Ili will take a price bump with that big score on the weekend, but Delhi might be one that you could look at with United coming into a couple of doubles.
Nice one, yeah. He's been a little bit quiet, so maybe it's coming for him. You mentioned a bit earlier Mooney, and I did like that because he's 252,000, 5.8% ownership, so he's very pottish. We obviously need him to turn his form around, but he's quite cheap. So if people are looking for a cheap one, again, 7 out of 8, the next ones are doubles for the New Zealand team. He's interesting. I'll finish on one other one, though, and it's a bit of a toss-up between two very different players. Walton Jr. is going to be very, very cheap soon, and he got benched on the weekend. Coach's decision. I thought he was hurt because I had him for 4 assists in my multi, and I was fuming, but he wasn't. It was a coach's decision, and it was because they wanted to ride the hot hand of young Foxwell. Now, is he going to be a buy? Because normally in SuperCoach, right, even when these young guys that explode, that are cheap, that have a big break even if they're not good buys, the SuperCoach trade market says that they are because a lot of people still trade them in. Foxwell's not being traded in by a lot of people, and he's got a minus 19 break even. He's only 145,000, and he looked phenomenal. He was obviously a career outing, and just he was aggressive, but the speed that he had and the hustle he had and then the tough shots he was hitting, I can see why Walton stayed on the bench. I thought that they might have played them together a little bit more or played a 3-guard lineup with Sobey even at the 3 spot or something like that, but they didn't go for it really. Before this round of 47 out of nowhere, though, he's only played 15, 14, 24, 19, 20 minutes. He's had a role, but it's been around that 15-ish minute mark. I tend to think that he's earned himself more of a role. Is it more of a role that's worth buying him? He's playing Cairns, which is a good matchup. He then has a double next week. So I certainly think over the next 2 rounds, which is 3 games, someone like someone like Foxwell could provide us some value. But, other people are saying, you know what? I think they're going to have to go back to Walton eventually. And when I'm looking up Derek Walton Jr., he's $205,000. He's going to be, after this next game, probably lower price than what Foxwell is. How do you separate these guys? Even just putting your real NBL cap on and looking at the substitutions and the rotation patterns, do you think that Walton Jr. is going to come back and get his minutes back, or do you think it's going to be, edging towards Foxwell again?
Well, first of all, I think the folks at Foxtel are going to be really grateful with the advertising. They're a good buy.
I'll try and get jobs and gigs anywhere I can, Nathan.
You're a brave man if you bring in Foxwell looking to start him on a double next week. The kid can play, but is he going to continue? Like, there's so much pressure to start your import guard, who's a grand final MVP from a couple of years ago and can really play. So I love that inside of Walton Jr. as a pod move. It's whether you're brave enough to go on him this week, or does he, I'm not sure what his break even is, but potentially he's in for another price drop and you bring him for the double a week later. But they did go to a bit of
40 break even, just so you know. So it's next week he's actually going to be primed. He's probably only going to be 180,000.
Yeah, so that's probably when you're looking coming on the double, I think. Foxwell, I think, is risky because who knows if he does play this week. They did go to that 3-guard lineup you mentioned with Sobey, but it was Angus Glover taking the minutes as well. So they played a fair bit of Glover, Foxwell and Sobey down the stretch. And that's why I thought they could have gone back to Walton Jr. because this guy's an absolute jet, and I think he's really important if the Phoenix is going to make a run in terms of getting him playing, because he's a real facilitator. So he's a guy that's going to get everyone involved, and they're having a hard time working out if him and Sobey can play well together. But I think they could stagger those minutes a little bit. Foxwell, Walton Jr. could be great at getting Glover, whether it's Foxwell, other guys involved, trying to find Wieskamp some form as they're trying to get roles going in, and then they stagger Sobey and Walton Jr. maybe. But I think he's going to play, and he was one I was looking at, not just this week, but not quite this week, because I think next week going that double, he'll be super cheap and maybe well be the buy.
Yeah, it's a fortnightly decision with Foxwell. You've got to decide on this week, and Walton Jr. It's a next week. So interesting, because I do think that Walton Jr., like you mentioned, facilitator. Like, I think that he helps everyone else play a bit better. And I do think, particularly when you look at someone like Hurt, I don't think that he's found his buckets as easy with Walton Jr. not there at the point spot. And that's someone who you want to find easy buckets, because I think the last couple of weeks in particular, I think that Hurt's been a bit down on form and confidence, and you can see that a little bit. And he was the NBL's top point scorer up until recently as well on averages. So, I tend to think that Walton Jr.'s got to come good for them to even compete. And Foxwell's just such a different type of player. Like, he's a spark plug, 6-man type of guy for me. And as good as Sobey has been for them at times, I think that he's the guy that's kind of got to give way, to be honest. I think that reducing him by a few minutes and staggering those minutes is the way to go. And they can definitely play those 3 guys in that backcourt by doing that. So interesting buys next week. Foxwell, look, I think that you could jump on him. Like, if you're a team that really needs cash and you are looking ahead and you really believe that he's going to get 20 plus minutes a game over the next 3 round games, then it'll work out for you. But you've got to make that call. Let's talk about captains. So to finish up on the episode, looking at this week's fixtures, PJC and Bryce Cotton were the 2 top players last week quite easily. Both of them are going to be front of mind again this week. You're a brave man to go off a 100-point round, Bryce Cotton. But if we know anything about the Hawks, it is that they can limit the guards. It is at Perth, but, is Bryce Cotton on fire, or can the Illawarra Hawks put him out a little bit and make it tough for him, which they have in the past, although mostly at the Snake Pit. But then that second game, you look at it and go, well, he's away at Adelaide, but look, it might be the repeat. He could only throw up 23 points that first game. Illawarra limits him. Then he goes to Adelaide, who are down Davis in that backcourt, and he goes in and he proves a point, and he just throws up a 60-point game again for SuperCoach. It's pretty hard to jump off someone like Bryce Cotton with the form he's in. But PJC has 2 home games against hard matchups, with the United team going to New Zealand and then the Sydney Kings going to New Zealand. But both of them are in New Zealand. So to me, they're the top 2 ones that you're deciding between before you start to look at some of the pod options. But to be honest, even the pod options are good, because you've got Jack White double for Melbourne United.
I think outside of those 3, it's pretty hard to justify anyway. You're pretty brave if you're going outside of Cotton or PJC, especially when you saw what they could do in that second game of the round on the weekend. Jack White, has got a pretty high ceiling, and you could make a case for Jack White if you're trying to be a bit of a pod. But any pod outside of that's really risky. I think I'm open to hear if you've got any others, but just off the back of the weekend and what both Bryce and PJC did in that game, you'd be pretty brave to. This might be a week just to, play it straight and make sure you lock in the captain you need to and choose correctly between Bryce or PJC. And if you get it wrong, hopefully, like on the weekend, it's not too much of a difference, and then play on for the following week.
So you're telling me I can't go Sam Wardenberg, mate?
I
was waiting. Hands double.
I need someone in the top 500 to give me a chance to catch up to them. So I'd really appreciate rolling with Sam Wardenberg. I mean, Tanner Groves would be really keen, but it's hard to go past Bryce and PJC.
Yeah, you got to look at those guys. And then if you want someone different, like White will be a pod captain because people will stay on those backcourt guys. So I think if you are going to go pod, you go White because you hopefully bank on 2 double-doubles. And again, playing New Zealand and Brisbane, if they have depletion in that front court rotation, which we don't know yet until we get some injury updates, and that could be White feasting. He could get 30 rebounds over those 2 games. So that's the interesting pod play for me, which is still a reasonably popular one. Look, that's going to be the podcast, but we do need to mention for the show, everyone jump on the SC Hub Discord server. It is fantastic. And we've got that many great performances on the weekend. It's insane. I don't want to mention that I top scored for the SC Hub, except I did, and I don't get to say that very often. I'm normally outscored by a lot of people, so it's a nice change. But jump on Discord. Also follow on YouTube for the show and everything. And for the other sports too, we've got NRL. He's going to open for SuperCoach pretty soon as well. We've got BBL, everything else. That's all on the Discord server as well for the SC Hub. Great advice and great community. So jump on board and support it. Nathan, you're a very busy man, I'm sure. So appreciate you making a cameo on the SC Hub show for NBL. You're fountain of knowledge, and thank you very much for jumping on.
Barnesy, thanks so much for having me. Hopefully my week goes okay now that I've shared whatever gold I've got with the wider community here on SuperCoach Hub.
I reckon you're in for a cracker week, mate, so don't worry about that. And so Sam Wardenberg, everyone, but probably won't end up getting him in anyway. Good luck for everyone for the round as well out there. Hopefully you choose the right captains and you choose the right trades. The Hub will be back next week with another episode. Until then, enjoy your NBL. We'll be back again next week.